Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library, and today I have another great guest on. And the reason why I think this guest is great is because, as you've probably seen, there's so many aspects of business and so many different dynamics to it. So it's always great when you have someone that has a vast wealth of knowledge from things that he's had his hand in with developing some products that are impacting business across the board. For example, one of my personal favorites is Excel. You're working in pivot tables, you know what? A lot of the things that you're probably seeing there are things that he had his hand in developing, whether that's with IBM, things, products with Apple, and it goes on. And so I want to welcome to the show Randy Johnston. Welcome to the show, Randy.
Well, Terrell, thank you for the invitation, and I'm pleased to speak with you and your normal listeners.
Awesome, awesome. Now, I gave a little bit about your background, but I guess before we jump into, talking about the great work that you do at K2, can you give us just a little synopsis of, some of the other things that you got going on along with K2?
Yeah, thank you for that. I basically am an entrepreneur by heart, I guess I would say, with a technology bent. And because of my early work in healthcare, I'm working on some genetics testing products for pharmacogenetics. I'm doing small business development work in Dubai. Further, am doing regular IT support 24 by 7 from Boston to Honolulu for banks, healthcare entities, and CPA firms. And then beyond that, I'm also involved in the brand new development of a bank core processing system, which will be the first new bank core processing system developed in the world in over 20 years. And so we're pretty excited about that. And, bottom line is pretty simple. I go where people invite me. And if I can help, I will. And if not, I'll introduce them to somebody that I know can get the job done.
Awesome. Now, how do you manage all that?
Well, as my wife has learned, I don't sleep a lot. I'm pretty fortunate. It's healthy that people get 7 or 8 hours of sleep a night, but I've run for years on 3 to 5 hours of sleep with no impact. They say it's going to shorten your life, but I hope to live to be 102, and my mom's 97. So I've got genetics that tell me I'm probably going to get there. I spoke to mom last night, as a matter of fact. And, in the big picture of things, not unlike Thomas Edison, who used to work a few hours and sleep when he needed something and get up and work some more, I get so excited about new projects. I just wake up and I'm ready to go. So today was no exception. 12:50 in the morning. It's like, bing! Oh man, I want to go do that. So I worked on this thing for 3 or 4 hours, and about 5:30, I said, "Ooh, I better get ready to do my presentation to the East Coast." So I do not recommend people work long hours, but I have a history of traveling on the road for 40 years. I've been on the road almost every week for 40 years until March 11th when I came home for COVID and stayed this year. And but fundamentally, when I was on the road, I just kind of wake up and work on something. And so that's kind of the story. It's not a good story. It's not a healthy story. It's not a work-life balance story. But I'm doing exactly what I want. I don't know how much more fun you could have.
Awesome, awesome. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask, I mean, just out of, my personal interest, like, as most accountants and people in finance, Excel is a huge part of their life. I mean, and definitely the use of pivot tables. What was that experience like? I mean, working on the development side and the work that you did related to Excel, Microsoft Excel and pivot tables.
Well, that's something I hadn't thought about in a while. And I can tell you, I used to go to Redmond on a pretty regular basis, and we would meet and develop various things over time. I can tell you that the early pieces, because we also helped with the development of Lotus 123 and Quattro Pro and some other VisiCalc, some other spreadsheets you may not have ever used. But the Microsoft folks invited us in and said, look, we'd like some help to see if we could actually get accountants to use our product because Lotus 123 was the dominant thing. And so we went through a whole bunch of different things. And I remember the product manager, whose name was Dorothy Liu, and we sat around a table with, 12 developers. And of course, I'm an old programmer coder myself, so I can stay up with the best of them on writing code. And we explained a bunch of things that accountants needed. And the programmer said, oh, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. And the accounting format, which I'd mentioned, I think, I helped design that. I explained why it's important to have your dollar signs and decimal points line up and why it makes sense to have a space on the right where a negative sign can appear. Well, we got going on that, and then we got to this concept that, accountants are used to looking at things in tabular formats from financial statements. Wouldn't it be interesting if for reporting purposes we could reformat, drag and drop columns and rows into different positions and have it do automatic summary? And so we sketched that out on a board, explained how that would work, and you can see the programmers looking at each other saying, why would people use that? And so then we explained, why you might if you're doing consolidated financials and it's still right over their head. They're programmers, not accountants, for heaven's sakes. And I get that. But it was real clear that Dorothy Lou could see what was going on. And she said, I think you might really be onto something here. And I said, it gets even better, because if eventually we hook this up to databases on the back end, if you consider these grids that we've built in spreadsheets and you consider how databases work with this, we'll be able to dynamically report out to databases, and these things will get bigger and bigger over time. And today, that's the world of data warehouses and data lakes. So if you think about Azure data lakes, that's just a special type of reporting, and I won't go into all the technical programming behind it. But this idea of how you drop and report, and even Terrell, the combination of repeatedly dragging parameters with into a pivot table so you can vary the way you sum or count or whatever, so you get different results. Conceptually, that was easy to build technically, but unless you've done a lot of pivot table work, you actually don't picture, oh, I could do that. Now, good news is that the pivot table features are going to become less common here in the near future, because the Excel data model, which was introduced back in 2013 and became much better in 16, much better in 2019, will be the new pivot table replacement. So normally today, when I'm talking about Excel, I really talk about the three tables. So we want to learn all three table types, but the data model is really the pivot table of the future. So your listeners, if they're not using data models today, they need.
All right. Okay, there you go. I think we got a little stuck there. But I'll edit that out though. No problem.
Okay, that's so good. Yeah, I saw it looked like you were stuck.
Well, that's the good thing about doing post-production edit, so I can take care of that.
That's super.
Awesome. So, now I want to talk about, K2 and the business that, that aspect of, providing further education for professionals and business owners, people that are in the field of running a business, and just, how did that come about? Like, how did you go from technology to that?
Well, that's a fair question. And K2 has been around since the 80s. And realistically, the CPAs that were the founding partners, I was not a founding partner of K2, were teaching spreadsheets on the road. And it was Lotus 123, by the way, dominantly at that point in time. And there was then this thing that came up called local area networks, which were brand new in the early 80s. And of course, that was one of my expertise. And I spoke at national conferences and I taught people about these things called local networks. So what happened then is this team of CPAs that were teaching CPAs about technology and how to use tools like Lotus 123 and email and things like that, they knew they had to have some expertise in local area networks. And said, hey, would you like to join us? And I said, well, yeah, it seems interesting. Further, I had already deployed a local area network for a small little company you might recognize the name of, CCH, in Wichita, Kansas, because I personally put in their first network here in Wichita, where they did their tax product and tax support. Another office was down in Southern California. But really, realistically, Terrell, what had happened to me is I started really doing technology, and I came from mainframes down to mini computers. So I worked on all of IBM and the seven dwarfs, as we used to call them, digital, NCR, Unisys. I've worked on them all, and I can code on all of them. And then I came down to PCs, and then I saw, ooh, this networking thing's going to be big. And I had the privilege of working with Bob Metcalf, who invented Ethernet, and Vinton Cerf, the father of the internet. I know those guys. And but in any case, so now I'm doing local area networks, and then all of a sudden this internet thing we're connecting, and then I started deploying accounting software on local area networks, and then I started designing accounting software on local area networks. So I went then from local area networks to accounting software to, oddly enough, next paperless, then workflow, and then it's like CPA firms started calling me in saying, look, we need help with these things. So it was like, well, I know something about tax and I know something about audit. Oh, gosh, if I just learn a few more tools. So today, most of the tools that are products that are used in the profession, I've had a little bit of a finger in helping design or create strategic direction there. So I don't mind disclosing, and it is true that all of the big boys are direct clients, CCH, Thompson, Intuit. How many do you want me to name? And I've done a lot of design work. So the way I got there, accidental. It wasn't like I had a plan to go do this when I grew up. In fact, my rule of thumb is, I never want to grow up.
Awesome. I like that attitude. I mean, and I like the reality of being able, like I said, to help with so many and how the skills become so transferable. I know before we got started with the interview, you and I were talking about some of the CPE training and just kind of with your background in technology. As you do some of the CPE training and the educating, do you find that accounting and finance professionals are, grabbing a hold of the newer technology, or do they seem to be a little hesitant in jumping on board with some of it?
Well, that's a fair question. And it depends on the professional, and it has nothing to do with age, as it turns out. I know some very young, you know, 50, 60, 70-year-old professionals, and I know some very old 20 and 30-year-old professionals. And, if we go back, and I'm going to answer your question directly, but I'll just say that my personal mission has been to help as many people as possible use technology in the way that benefits them the most. That's part of the reason I've enjoyed the continuing professional education so much, because what I'm trying to do is help people understand and get the vision of how technology can help them. And so, you know, CPAs in general are busy people. They got a lot on their platters in general, and they just want stuff to bloody work. So they don't really want to get the latest bell and whistle. They want to adopt something that's pretty tried and true. Now, there will be a few professionals that I would call heat seekers or early adopters. But my rule of thumb on early adopters is they're pioneers and they take a lot of arrows.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, it's a lot safer to be in a wagon train than it is to be out, as a scout. And but we also don't want you to be a laggard in adopting technology. So the trick in my mind is to teach professionals how the tools can benefit them, how there really is an ROI, and if they'll simply invest a little bit of time to learn how the tool works, that the tools should be a superior way to do the work. So it's not about a bell or whistle, it's about a way to deliver the best product to the client, how to minimize the effort it takes for you to deliver that product. And if you can invest in yourself, it's more than CPE hours. It's your continuous learning program. You're trying to expand your horizons and your capabilities, and the more you learn, the better off you are. That's part of the reason why, for example, right now and for 20 years, I've been encouraging CPA professionals to provide advisory services, because those are highly valued to the clients. See, most of the public practice professionals are doing compliance work, tax and audit. They're looking in the rearview mirror. Advisory is looking out the windshield. So they're looking forward. Advisory is real high level. It's strategic. It's planning. And then you can drill down with expertise, and most firms are providing consulting expertise and they're billing as consulting, but I don't think they should actually offer consulting in a reactionary mode, which is the way most do it. You should be proactive in getting that. So the trick here is, how can I convince you as a professional to think about your practice proactively and client-centric, or if you're an industry CPA, how can I help you protect and improve your business in the best ways possible and use technology as a lever? So, when you were asking about, working so hard and how do I do it so quick, well, I'm using technology as a lever every way I can, but I happen to know a lot of the levers. And see, many of the CPA professionals don't know which levers to push. They don't even know the lever exists in some case. And I watch people flounder trying to do stuff that is so easy to do, but they haven't invested in themselves to know the easiest way to do it. That's why data models in Excel now is probably a better approach than pivot tables. But we've got, 1997, so we've got, 23, 24 years of pivot tables around. Gosh, do we want to leave this tried and true tool to go to this new tool? Yeah, I'm thinking, no, we're going to stay on the old one. No, you want to get to the new one. That's a bit of a rant, Terrell, but does it help? Does it give you guidance on that?
No, I think it does. I think it does. And I mean, and speaking of that, like, with the types of training and the types of education that you guys do, where can people find you online or find K2 so they can start, learning about, hey, what are the new tools?
Yeah. Well, we would love to have any of your listeners as users of our CPE. And it turns out we will do some training through the Florida Institute where you're at, but the best way to catch us in most cases is through your local state society. Each one of the states do business with us as K2, but you can also find us directly at K2E, just as simple as it sounds, K2enterprises.com. And you can actually just click on the search button and look for courses, and you can find us that way. And the reality is we've got a catalog of about 70 CPE courses, and our philosophy is very simple. We're going to show you a technology and how it can apply to the accounting profession. And our goal is, when you go through one of our courses, at the end of the 1 or 2 or 4 or 8 or 16 hours, whatever you've chosen, you will get that back within the month after you take it. In other words, if you do a 1-hour course, that 1-hour investment you'll probably get back within the next week or so. And that's the goal, is we want to show you enough. Well, in the old days we called them tips and tricks, but that's not really the way it works now. But the fact of the matter is, again, just about any topic. So you want to talk Power BI, you want to talk PDF, you want to talk Teams, you name your technology, we try to have an offering in that space.
Gotcha. Awesome. Awesome. Well, before we wrap up, one last question I like to ask every guest that comes on is, when you think about, your experience and where you have been and the type of work that you're doing. In this case, I would say, what's 2 pieces of advice that you would offer to CPAs and finance professionals?
Fair question. And I think I'll respond this way. And I'm smiling because it's a cold question, and I get those occasionally. So this is not rehearsed for your listeners to know. First, I would nurture your desire to learn. And my belief is that most public practice and industry professionals want to help others. And you can't lose that vision. So to help you do that, again, you'll learn quite a little bit, but take that, number one. And then number two, I think if you have a continuous learning ethic where you're trying to learn something new every day, over time, that will accumulate. And my rule of thumb is I always learn something new every day, and I can learn something from every person. So it doesn't matter whether you think the other people are smart or dumb. If you listen, you're going to figure out you learn from them. I've been lucky enough to be surrounded by a lot of really brilliant people. I'm from Kansas. Kansas KS stands for keep it simple. I'm a pretty simple guy. And bottom line is when I walk into a meeting, I'm almost never the smartest person in the room, but I know how to listen and help people. And, I try to tell the truth. In fact, I always tell the truth is the right way to think about that. And, I'm polite and, try to deal with people like that. And if you will take that type of attitude about helping people to the max, the rewards to you personally will be great. And you can't get the cart before the horse. You can't be looking for the rewards and trying to help people. You got to be helping people, and the natural rewards will come. So that's kind of a long rant to give you two pieces. I could have done it real simple, but you get it.
Got it. Well, Randy, thank you so much for coming on the show, telling us more, learning a little bit more about your background, the things you're doing, telling us about K2. We'll definitely include some links so people can find, the resources that K2 offers, because I definitely think, accounting and finance professionals getting better with leveraging and adopting and getting the value out of the technology will be very critical for them to be able to expand and add value for their clients, for the profession or for the companies that they work with. So thank you so much for coming on.
Very pleased to spend the time with you. Nice to meet you from afar. And I hope there'll be a point in time where I meet you and your listeners face to face or virtually. We'll talk to you again very soon. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like our content, be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want to see more of our exclusive content, you can subscribe and become a member on patreon.com/Business Talk Library. Hey, the Business Talk Library is the place where business makes sense.